Titus chapter 2. There's only one. But yep, first one will work. What page? 1843 if you got the giant print special edition one. If you find 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, then Titus is at the end of them. Yeah, find all your T's and right before Hebrews. And if all else fails, look in the front of the Bible and all the books are listed there with page number beside it. They should have taught you that in about 7th grade, somewhere along there, before the ACTs ever came out. What year? I don't know. I took it in 74. I don't know. We rewrote them in 80. Made them harder for the coming generations. Titus chapter 2. Everybody got it? I know it. If you can't find it, stand up and identify yourself. All right, Titus chapter 2. Verse number 1. We're going to start reading. We're going to read about, I don't know, maybe several verses. And then I'm going to tell you a story. And hopefully we've got a number of young people in the audience this morning. And I really would like for you to listen carefully today. You older people that have suffered with self-esteem issues and not living up to your potential, I'd like for you to listen carefully. If you're here this morning and you got it all going in your life and nothing's challenging for you, you can go have a donut next door or whatever. But for those of us who need this, it's a real practical lesson this morning from a favorite movie of mine. And I'll give you the title to get you to thinking as soon as I can find my other page of notes. Because I've got Sunday nights and Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, and I never know what God's going to allow me to preach till I get here. And so, but today's message is you can learn a lot from a lion tale. Not a lion's tale, but a lion tale. Okay? You can learn a lot from a lion tale. T-A-L-E tale. Okay? Titus chapter 2. But speak thou those things which become sound doctrine, that the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in patience, faith, charity. The aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, and not given to much wine, teachers of good things. That they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. Young men likewise also exhort, and to be sober-minded. In all these things showing thyself a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech, that cannot be condemned, that he that is of the contrary part may be ashamed, and having no evil thing to say of you. Exhort servants to be obedient unto their own masters, and to please them well in all things, not answering again, not prolonging, but showing in all fidelity that they may adorn the doctrine of God our Savior in all things. I want to stop there, and basically what this particular passage is Paul's instruction to Titus to give to the church there. He's telling the young men how to live, the young women how to live, the older women how to live, and how to take care of themselves. Everything from, you ladies, you go to work, your boss asks you to get you a cup of coffee. Yes, I'm on the way getting a cup of coffee. You come home, your husband asks you to get him a cup of coffee, and you get it yourself, you lazy old man. That kind of thing. Treat your husbands with more respect than you treat the outside world. Likewise, your husbands. Love your wives. Take care of her. If you're going to smile and say sweet things to your coworker, then you need to smile and say sweet things to your wife. Those kind of things. How many of you have been guilty of being in the middle of a fight or disagreement or whatever, and the phone rings, and you go from, "You sorry, good for nothing," "Hello?" Something's got to change, And so, but it's just it's a basic instruction for life. And that's what the Bible is. Basic instruction before leaving earth. B-I-B-L-E, basic instruction before leaving earth. That's what the Bible is all about. It's teaching us how to live. It's telling us how to live. And so I want to talk to you this morning in a practical application about you can learn a lot from a lion tale. There was a movie that came out a few years ago, and I'm not a big movie person. I'm not, you're not going to go to hell if you watch a movie or anything like that. Sorry, guys, but there's a movie that came out a few years ago, and it was an animated movie, and the main character was a guy named Simba. How many of you know who I'm talking about? Good. I didn't know if they'd heard about Simba over in Germany or not. So, didn't know if he'd made it quite that far. I knew he ran far, far away, but I didn't know how far he ran. But anyway, Simba, and you guys probably know the movie far better than I do because I only watched it once. But Simba, not all the time, okay. But Simba was the son of Mufasa and Sarabi. He was born to be the king of Pride Rock. I mean, his heritage, his position was already settled before he was ever born. Now, pay attention. Remember, this is church, okay? And so pay attention to what I'm saying. He was born of the king and his wife, and he was born to replace the king at some point in time. Now, Uncle Scar had problems with that decision. Everybody knows who Scar was, right? He was Mufasa's brother. So Scar got turning his wheels and planned the demise of Mufasa. And he set Simba up to where he could blame Simba for the death of Mufasa. So after he fell off the cliff, and about half of you cried like a baby when he fell over. But then Scar came to Simba and he said, "It's your fault. You killed your dad. Run away from here and never come back." Satan does not want you to have the heritage that God has for you. You were born for a purpose. God had your plan laid out ever before you were a gleam in your daddy's eye. But Satan doesn't want you to fulfill that promise. Simba was born a king. Simba was to be the king of Pride Rock. Simba was to be held up by the monkey in front of everybody. Simba was the man. He was born to be royalty. He was born to a position that was set apart just for him. But something came in between that. Scar came into his life and said, "It's your fault. You did something stupid. You don't deserve to be king. You don't deserve your heritage. Run far, far away." So he did. He took off running down into the jungle, and he ran and he cried and he ran and he cried and he ran and he cried. And he ended up in the middle of the dark, gloomy jungle where he had never been before. He was a plains lion. He didn't know anything about jungles. He was out of place. And in the jungle, he came upon two characters that were quite a bit below his royalty status. He came in contact with a meerkat and a pig named Timon and Pumbaa. And everything was okay with Timon and Pumbaa. Just live for the day. Hakuna Matata. All is well. Let's just eat bugs and drink out of the creek and be good to go. Don't worry about who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be, or any of the stuff you're running from. And so Simba did. They knew, Timon and Pumbaa knew, that Simba had the power to eat them. They knew his rightful position, but they befriended him and brought him down to their level. He was king of the pride. He was king of Pride Rock. He was the king of the jungle, but he didn't know he was king of the jungle. God has a place for you, a plan for you, and a purpose for you. And if Satan can thwart the plan of God and get you distracted, get you discouraged, get you self-esteem shot to heck, if he can get you below, if he can get you to hanging out with a bunch of people that are below your level of kingship. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you hung out with folks that were just a little bit lower than you are to make yourself look better. Some people marry that way. Now, I didn't. I married way above my pay grade, But so did she. Some of you will catch that after services, okay. But Timon and Pumbaa, they tricked Simba into becoming their level instead of becoming what he was born for. So he was running around eating bugs and swimming from the trees and trying to forget what he had run away from. See, down inside you somewhere, God has put a desire. I've said it many times. There's a God-sized hole in each one of our hearts. And the only thing that can fill that is God Himself. And God, before this planet was ever put into the universe, before one star was ever created, God had a plan for your life. God knew that in 1960, August the 30th, at 11-something at night, this little 9-pound, 14-ounce kid was going to be born of a 4-foot, 10-inch woman. And I was going to grow up unloved, uncared about, made fun of because I had 4 eyes and I was short and I was poor. And I learned to lift weights and I learned to be mean and I learned to fight. And I was below what God had called me to be. God knew long time before that I was going to be a preacher one day. God gave me a lot of scars that reminds me of places that's been healed. A lot of love that hurt. A lot of broken hearts along the journey. A lot of disappointment along the journey. But God knew what I was destined to be all along. And I ran from it. I tried to drown it out in all kinds of stuff. I tried to drown it out in sex and pleasure and drugs and everything that you could imagine. I tried to find satisfaction and fulfillment in. But remember, there's a God-sized hole that only He can fill. You can fill it up with drugs and the drugs will wear off. You can fill it up with booze and the booze will wear off. You can fill it up with sex and the sex will wear off. You can fill it up with fast cars and shooting guns and bullets and anything you want to try to fill it up with. But it's all just temporary. You young ladies, you can fill it up with boys and be the most popular girl in high school. But one day you'll be most popular for another reason. You can think he's 6'2" and fine, narrow behind, broad shoulders. But he'll treat you like dirt. It's kind of like diamonds for a girl. They'll shut her up just for a little while. You know? But he was happy. They were all running around singing Hakuna Matata. And then one day, and you know the story better than I, he was going across this log, and it showed the transition between young cub Simba progressing into adolescent Simba. And then his mane began to grow, and he began to develop into physically what he was destined to be. But he was still running around in the jungle hanging out with a cat and a pig, eating bugs. Just because he looked like a king didn't mean he was one. There's a bug crawling around in here in Sunday school this morning. Colston said something about it. There's a bug in church. You know? And that's the way a lot of people are. They think because they're a bug in church, they're automatically a Christian. You know, there's rats downstairs that don't make them Christians. Rose went to McDonald's this morning, don't make her a hamburger. You know, just because you're in church doesn't make you a Christian. Just because you can sing a song or read a verse once in a while doesn't mean you're where God has for you to be. You can learn a lot from a lion tail. Some of you are hanging out in a spiritual jungle not being what God has designed for you to be. The greatest tragedy of this story, it's not Mufasa's death. It's not hanging out with pigs and cats. It's not even living in a jungle eating bugs. But the biggest tragedy of this story, that he didn't know who he was. He had the potential and the power to be the king of the jungle. Instead, he was just hanging out with a pig and a cat, eating bugs. How many of us spiritually are hanging out with pigs and cats, eating bugs? When God has so much for us. I lived my life eating bugs and playing with pigs and cats. I lived my life having fun. Running around singing and dancing and swinging by my tail in the trees. Singing Hakuna Matata. Not having a care in the world and not caring about anybody. And then God came into my life and began to change all of that. And as I began to walk across that spiritual log, I began to see the plan that God had for me. And the plan that God had for me was far more pleasurable to the eye, to the senses, to the emotion, to the spirit, than eating bugs and swimming in my tail. I get to be a preacher of the gospel. I get to tell people every day about Jesus. I get to tell people, this is what's going on in your life, and if you'll give your life to Jesus, He can change all of that. The sermon tonight that I started with the kids in Sunday school this morning, when you give a lot, when you give a little, you're going to end up with a lot. And when he began to walk across that log, and when I began to walk across that log, spiritually speaking, I began to see the transition. And I'm sorry, Courtney, but I began to see the transition between the raging bull and Pastor Randy. And I began to see what Satan wanted for me and what God wanted for me.